Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Sharon Lazich. I am the Deputy Director of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa office at USAID Pakistan in Islamabad, Pakistan. And also a fun fact, I completed a leadership rotation at NASA as a Presidential Management Fellow in 2015. Welcome to the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network, the PUAN Network, Facebook chat on space, sustainability, and technology. For those of you who may not be in the know, PUAN was launched in 2008 and now has 14 chapters around Pakistan and engages more than 32,000 alumni and different U.S. government exchange programs that strengthen people-to-people ties through shared values and nurture a common vision. PUAN's mandate is to bring positive change in society, capitalizing on the knowledge, skills, and expertise by alumni during their exchange program to the U.S. Please continue to visit our Facebook page for more information about how you can be involved and perhaps even one day be invited onto a panel discussion yourselves. Today, we are here to discuss space sustainability and technology. This is a topic that is very dear to my heart. Some of my earliest memories are of my mother and my father, who is an astronomer, Gary Lazich. Hi, Dad. And taking me and my brothers out to gaze at the stars, helping us to contemplate our place in the cosmos. I've carried the mystery and wonder of the cosmos throughout my education, my personal life, and my career, and I am delighted to facilitate this panel discussion with such distinguished guests. Speaking of whom, I would like to introduce our panel. First, we have Mr. Mahhad Nair, who was awarded the Department of State 4 years International Cadet Exchange Program Scholarship. He graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy as a part of the class of 2014, double majoring in astronautical engineering and humanities, along with successfully completing the cadet training program. He is currently pursuing a Master's of Engineering in Space Systems, Space Tech, from Technical University in Graz, Austria, where the main focus of the 2020 Space Tech cohort is to enhance space domain awareness. Apart from the space domain, he is passionate about interdisciplinary studies, sustainable development, and subcontinental history and heritage. Welcome. Next, we have Dr. Waqas Qazi. He received his PhD from the Department of Aerospace Engineering, University of Colorado in Boulder in the United States in 2013 under a Fulbright fellowship with a focus in remote sensing and earth and space science. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Space Science at the Institute of Space Technology in Islamabad, Pakistan, where he co-founded the Geospatial Research and Education Lab. He is also associated in an R&D capacity with Offshore Monitoring Limited. His areas of specializations include, bear with me, aerospace engineering sciences, remote sensing, synthetic aperture radar imagery, and interferometric data processing and analysis, visible infrared high-resolution satellite image processing and analysis, oceanography, Earth system study and modeling, and scientific programming. Next, we have Dr. Maudood Khan. Is a graduate of George Washington University and the Georgia Institute for Technology. Dr. Khan brings 20 years of experience in the use of remote sensing and advanced Earth system models to inform decisions for public and private sector organizations. During his distinguished career, he has engaged extensively with policymakers, scientists, businesses, and academia on diverse issues such as management of science, research, and technology development for organizations, the role of science in public sector decision-making and development planning, and on mitigating the threats posed by the interaction of scarcity, environmental degradation, disease, and climate change on vulnerable societies and people. As a lead scientist, Dr. Khan currently supports NASA Earth Science Division leadership team, including their interagency and international engagements. In addition to various program analysis activities, Dr. Khan coordinates applied science programs assessment of federal civilian agency satellite needs. Welcome. And I'm just going to check to see if we have our final panelist who's not available. So in preparation for this panel discussion, again, something that I have a deep interest in. I had been reflecting on the life of former NASA astronaut Michael Collins, and a quote that he shared is something that touched me very deeply, which is, "Exploration is not a choice, really. It's an imperative. And so my question, and I'm going to dig down a bit deeper on each of these with each of your diverse backgrounds, but the question is, why invest in space and why now? Importantly, why should Pakistan invest in space and space technologies? And Dr. Waqas, if you wouldn't mind speaking to this first, and I have a follow-up question after that.
Yes, thank you, Sharon. I think I loved the way you said you have had a passion for space. And although my father was not an astronomer, but he was a scientist. So I have had a passion for space for some reason since I was in grade 5. And I initially came to this field because I had a passion for it. But the more I dived into it, I found that this is not a choice anymore. There is literally nothing working on this planet now where it does not have a space component. From agriculture to shipping to managing cities, it is not a choice anymore. Our infrastructure, the ways that we are set up our communication, just imagine if the satellite communication links break down, then we are going back around 40 years because we are losing this global connection that we have. So I agree fully with this statement that it is not a choice anymore. And I can just roll off examples, the things I do every day, things I teach every day in my courses. I work with my students in research. We are looking at forests, so that connects directly with the global climate change. So, these small efforts we are making with this space component in our life, they are contributing to the whole planet. Small contributions together coming up to serve the whole planet.
Can you speak a little bit briefly about your experience with Surveyor and the NASA-USAID partnership, and how through that partnership you were able to gain skills that directly benefited the work that you do currently and what's going on here in Pakistan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very, very interesting question. As you mentioned, I came back to Pakistan in 2013 after finishing my PhD in the US, in our Fulbright program. So I came back. We set up our new lab, as you mentioned, the Geospatial Research Education Lab, and of course, it's a new baby you're setting up. There's a lot of things going on, and I heard about the Surveyor Hindu Kush Himalaya program, HKH, which was being administered through the ISB-RWP agency in Nepal, so for the region, and I applied for that, and I was very lucky that just in my first year at my new position, I won that funded project. It was amazing. I went there. There was very good mentorship. We had 3 overall meetings in different countries. We got to know regional people as well. And that really gave me this big step forward, this push. They gave me this funding to really start establishing my own framework. I hired 2 students. I made them work day and night. And I was very happy with just 1 year of work. We managed to publish 2 very good journal papers out of it. We studied forests in Pakistan. We did things that no one had done in Pakistan before. They were small efforts. We put them together. We implemented some new methods. And I'm very happy to say that those, indirectly, those students that I trained, they are in very good careers position right now because of that training. I consider that training to be a big part of their development. So I benefited a lot from the Surveyor program. And I really wish and hope that more people, especially people who are at the start of their academic career, like when I was back in 2014, I think it's the most beneficial for them to give them a kickstart, give them some motivation, and help them to tackle the challenges that are on ground, that are especially challenges that Pakistan are facing. And that was, I think, one of the great things about this program, that they asked for proposals which would help us tackle problems that are existent on the ground, real problems on the ground in Pakistan.
Great, thank you. Mahhad, I'd like to bring you into this conversation because you benefited also from exchange programs, not just in the United States, but currently in your academic career. And I was wondering, A, if you could speak to something that Waqas just said about it's not a choice anymore. Do you agree with that? And then I would also like to follow up with what role you see international cooperation playing in this type of an industry.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for the introductions as well. So it is definitely not a choice anymore, because I think I'll take it back to the grade level education. Like when we go to school for the first time and we learn the very basic things, we are told that there are 3 mediums. There is land, there is air, and there is water. And you walk on the land, you swim in the water, or you fly in the air. But I think we need to change that narrative, and we need to add a 4th medium, which is space. And by adding that medium in comprehensively, making a choice to add that, it will really help in building our narrative that there is something above air as well. And about the global cooperation, I'll give an example that when after World War II, when the aircraft started becoming commercial, they had to develop an aircraft traffic management system for traffic control so that the aircrafts don't come and collide with each other. So in a similar manner, we are seeing exponential increase in man-made satellites, and we had around 1,400 from Sputnik 1 till a few years from now. And then now in the just last 3 to 4 years, we had another 1,500 active satellites. So we doubled that number of objects. And now in the next few years with the mega constellations, it is going to really increase exponentially. So you will not be able to have a safe and sustainable space as a medium unless all the countries come together and develop a mechanism where they share, just like aircraft, they share where their spatial objects are, so that we don't end up colliding with each other. And this is known as Kessler's syndrome, which was presented in 1970s, that the number of objects can increase to an extent where a cascading effect of collisions will give rise to making space unsustainable, and we won't be able to use it anymore. And a lot of us, as Waqas said, almost everything will collapse. So international cooperation in space is mandatory, and until or unless it happens, we won't be able to keep it sustainable. And it is just another dimension of climate change by space, by considering this as climate of space.
Can you speak briefly to the imperative for Pakistan to invest more in its space and space technologies, and where, if you have a sense of where they are in this field and how they're emerging, and how we talk to a general public about getting excited about something like space technologies? Oftentimes there's a trickle-down effect, right? I believe NASA has a page dedicated to this alone, space technologies that help the everyday person to understand the benefits of them. How is there a robust conversation taking place among Pakistani academia and students about the importance of pursuing these fields, and what does that look like here?
I think Pakistan must think very seriously about the use of space for daily technologies, and I think Pakistan is going into that direction, because we have a communication satellite that whenever we turn the TV on, it is doing digital video broadcasting using our own satellite, and there are a couple other satellites from Sparkle as well. So there is this sense that space is imperative, and even if we don't have our own space assets, you'll find yourself as a citizen of Pakistan using space-based technologies like GPS and all of the technologies, satellite communication, the imagery that is coming from all the commercial sources for agriculture and all the commercial purposes. So there is I think overall there is this thinking that we need to go there, and we are going there. I'm not too sure about what is our speed and what goals we can achieve in what time frame. But I think by inculcating a rigorous space technology curriculum in our universities, we can really do a good job there, because be it mechanical engineering, we need to break the boundaries. Mechanical, electrical, civil, whatever you study, there is a space component there that you can add how this particular engineering or field is applicable to that particular major. So if we do that, we can definitely speed up our pace of the space awareness and space technology among the younger minds.
Thank you. Maudood, I'd love to bring you into this conversation. You've had quite a career at NASA, and I was wondering if you could speak to the impetus behind investing in space, the importance of investing in it now, and perhaps how partnerships evolve between countries like Pakistan and the United States.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, science in general is for relieving human suffering and improving human conditions. So space is just part of it. That's there are a lot of reasons why. One is like you were talking about, how looking at upward on the sky was an inspiration for you. There's a lot of people who do that kind of thing. There's, the best thing that you can do for a young person is to inspire them. So space industry currently has a $350 billion in revenue. It's going to go up to a couple of $1 trillion in the next couple of years. And that's something that needs services, it needs talent. And so that's just, there are economic reasons for that. The problems that we are encountering in the world, like climate change and disease and agriculture productivity, the space assets provide a vantage point that no other nothing else provides. Finding the ozone hole, sea level rise, wildfires, pollution transport. When you look at the Earth as a system, you learn a completely different set of things. And if Pakistan wants to improve the life of its citizens and contribute to global well-being, this is an area that it should invest in. And Pakistan started off really well. Pakistan was only the third country to launch a rocket into space. It was USSR, USA, and Pakistan. So it started off really well. And I think it is time to sort of take another look at it and see how they can spur more investments in it. More broad-based investments from kindergarten all the way to higher education would be the way to do it, because you want to lift everybody up. There are equity considerations that are key to investing in technology that I think Pakistan should to think about.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that point on the inspiration piece, Mahhad mentioned having degree programs that are, space aeronautical engineering, cosmology, astronomy, astrobiology, and I know that Waqas works at a space institute, and so hopefully these can be, communications points of marketing points to get students more involved, to get students more active in these fields. So I, having benefited from that myself and been inspired, and I know my father had been inspired from a very early age after looking through his first telescope, can really have a dramatic effect on how people see themselves, how they see their role in society, and how they see their role as a global citizen. Mahhad, I want to switch gears really quickly because you beat me to a punch on a question that I had, but I want to go a bit deeper on it. As launch capabilities become cheaper and more accessible to spacefaring nations, as you've mentioned, we are running the risk of creating an enormous amount of space debris, which could have catastrophic consequences across the globe. And so I want to speak to you, if you can talk a little bit more about what space domain awareness is and what the vision that you have for how this can be better managed. You mentioned something similar to the air traffic control. What does that look like in practical terms? And is there any agreement that we have right now that helps to govern what gets launched and how it's managed?
So space domain awareness is basically a comprehensive understanding and knowledge of all the resident space objects. A resident space object is any active satellite or a defunctional satellite or a piece of debris. So any man-made object that is out there in space. So I think a lot of the major spacefaring nations like the United States or Russia or the European Space Agency, all these stakeholders are really concerned about the space domain awareness, and they are launching programs and missions where they can get more accurate readings or accurate data on where these objects are. The problem with space is the objects are really fast, and it's really far from here. So the distance and the speed always brings in this sort of uncertainty, which can cause towards inaccurate readings. And inaccurate data leads to incorrect analysis and false alarms for orbital collision. So the Space Data Association in the US and several other initiatives like International Scientific Optical Network that is started by Russia, and there's a lot of academic publications about sharing the data so that the entire space community can benefit from it. And the US space catalog is publicly available by the NORAD SALIS track. So even any student can go, and there are a lot of commercially off the shelf open source resources available just to be aware of how it is happening. Right now, the situation is quite fine, but with the launch of thousands of mega constellations like Starlink or Amazon's Kuiper or all these other ones, the population is going to be in terms of tens of thousands of these objects. So it is high time, especially for the countries who are launching these satellites, to give rise to a framework where they can share data. And I think United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs is also playing a role in bringing the nations together so that they can develop a framework, just like air traffic system, where the space traffic is also a common knowledge for the betterment of everyone.
Thank you. And I want to take a moment to pause to encourage our audience to please ask any and all questions on our Facebook page. We're populating them, and hopefully we'll be able to tackle most, if not all of them. Maudood, in your experience using data to inform policymakers, what for you in relation to the space debris concerns that we have, must we do as policymakers to face the future effectively and ensure that countries either that are already well-established space programs versus those that are more emergent that have an interest in launching more satellites into outer space? How do we square this circle, and as policymakers, what can we do to encourage dialogue?
Space in general has a very good, illustrious history of cooperation. Even at the height of the Cold War, US and Russia were collaborating in space. And outer space treaty throughout the Cold War was people adhered to it. It was one of the most successful UN treaties. And data is important, so you need the knowledge of what's going on in space. But eventually, it's a political decision about norms of behavior in space, and the fact that if you are behaving in space irresponsibly, you might create an accident that nobody wants. And so I think it's in terms of policymakers, I think the data and the modeling should indicate the catastrophic consequences of irresponsible behavior in space. I think that's really important, because most people are not aware of what could go wrong. These tiny particles can punch the International Space Station and bring it down. As it's also a values proposition, right? Space is known as a global commons, just like environment is. So there's we have to rethink. Because the world is not in a very good condition, and we don't want space to be like that, and keep it open for the benefit of humanity and for exploration to other planets. So I think there's a lot of discussions that need to be had within society about behavior in space and the norms that are the bedrock of any data and models that we might use to protect space from catastrophic problems.
Great. I'm going to come back to a point that you made a little bit later about innovations in space technologies. But Waqas, I wanted to ask you really quickly, in the context of what they just shared, do you see that the private sector may have ambitions beyond, or that counter the government sort of role, the regulatory role that governments play in trying to moderate what goes up and how long it gets to stay up, and what the survivability and the longevity of satellites are, and ensuring that companies have the capacity of bringing satellite technologies down safely? Do you see that as being in conflict right now, or ever? Or do you think that there's more of a symbiotic relationship between the private sector and the public sector in terms of regulatory frameworks?
Yes, it's a very interesting point, because this has ballooned up in the last few years. Because, I mean, the private satellite that were launched in, let's say, the 70s or the 80s, they were mostly only communication satellites, and they have a different orbit. There we don't have a problem. They are a stationary orbit. The real challenge comes when you're doing satellite imaging, and those satellites have a different kind of orbit. They go from south to north and Earth rotates underneath. So because they are in a low Earth orbit, they are in the range of 400 to 600 kilometers, and that's where the biggest challenge with respect to the debris comes on. So this has actually exploded in the last decade or so, primarily led actually by companies in the US. Now there are big mergers happening across the US and across the whole of North America. And this is very actually exciting time as a scientist for me. But I also see that this is where the issue of debris and these swarms or overpopulation of space, it becomes more and more important. But if you ask me honestly, I think the regulatory role is okay. I think they are just catching up with the science, because this big focus on the debris modeling, there was some studies on this in the decades before, but now there's a real focus. This is a very, very important area of research and modeling, and now it's not an issue of science fiction anymore, because I hope most of people watching this video have seen this news in the last decade. There have been 2 incidents where 2 satellites have collided. So it's not just an issue of just sitting in my computer and doing modeling anymore. It is real. And I personally, see the regulatory framework as sufficiently guiding enough the companies to keep on that track. It is a challenge because, as Mahhad mentioned, now we are having this huge explosion of satellites coming out. So it's becoming more and more important for the regulatory framework to make sure that those private launches, those big constellations coming out, remain within the guidelines of ensuring security in space and whatever is the method of bringing it down to space. There is another aspect where they put the satellite up much higher. They call it a parking orbit. Then the other option, as you say, is to bring it down safely to the Earth and get it burned in the atmosphere or to splash in the ocean.
Thank you. It is a complex problem that we face, and I think as we see more and more private industries growing as fast as they're growing, that this is going to be a continuous dialogue, I think, in terms of how to do what they do and how to do it safely. I would like to welcome Naseem Saiyed. Welcome to our panel discussion. Naseem has worked at NASA for 34 years in a number of different capacities, and I want to go back to the original question, because I think it's really important to contemplate our role in the cosmos and to discuss the imperative of space and investing in space technologies. So welcome to our panel, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the first question that I asked, which is why invest in space technologies and why now?
Thank you for inviting, and I apologize for being so late. It's all my fault. I messed up on the timings. I thought it was.
Blame the satellite.
Pardon?
Blame the satellites.
I thought it was at 11 a.m. and not at 10 a.m. So all my fault. You asked a question about why go into space and why spend the funding, use the funding to get into space. There has always been the thought about exploration, right? We want to know what's out there, what's new, what's on the horizon. And I akin that to when we go on the beach, we always want to go to the next hill, the next sand hill, and we want to try to see, pick up the next shell and pick up the next shell after that. Space is exactly like that. It fulfills our need for discovery. It's a basic fundamental need. But it's more than that, because when you go to the beach and you go out on hiking or bike rides and you are simply trying to figure out what's next over the horizon, this is not about, you cannot do that in space. You have to have all the funding necessary so you can do your exploration. once you get into the exploration side of the house, you know, there are all sorts of economic indicators that tell you that exploration really returns the funding back to the organization and to the governments and whoever is doing it. That's what I think, that and there is a significant amount of data available, starting with Columbus. If you want to go back that far, he went for exploration, but he didn't do it out of the goodness of his heart. He was trying to find a passage to India, a shortened passage to India.
Mm-hmm.
And Queen Isabella was not doing it because she thought it was a good idea. She was doing it so she could get the money back. Fast forward today, you have UAE that is involved into space and heavily investing there because they see a future for it, for their own people. India is already there, right? Saudi Arabia is working on it. China is already there. So these are all countries that see the economic potential, and they see the cadre of people that begin to have in their countries of high technology and what's the word I want to use here? Not only high technology, but also teaching the future generations. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that feeds on itself, and I think that's why we should all be looking into space and exploration.
Yeah, it makes me reflect on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where at the bottom it is about survivability, and I would argue that there's a significant portion of the world who are still in a sort of hand-to-mouth scenario, and contemplating the cosmos can be seen as a luxury. There are others who would argue that, and I think some have made the argument before you came on, that there is no choice. This is where we are, and this is what's going to help enable and unlock economic growth and hopefully make better decisions for policymakers and how to minimize the risks of climate change. I want to switch gears really quickly before going to the Q&A. Again, to the Facebook audience, please feel free to ask any and all of your questions. I want to skip over something. It's not quite skipping, but it's moving the conversation along to space commercialization. You mentioned the prospects of space commercialization and the financial benefits that could motivate private industries to want to go up. They say it's the next $1 trillion industry, right? Landing any sort of anything on an asteroid that could have rare minerals and resources might allow us to build and continue to build in outer space, not necessarily even bringing it back to Earth. So since you're a professor at the Institute of Space Technology, Waqas, what innovations, technologies, capabilities are you most excited about over the next 5 to 10 years that might help us to get there?
Well, I think this is just I feel lucky that, I don't know, maybe I would have felt the same way if I was in the position 10 years ago, but today I feel lucky that I'm in the middle of a storm. I mean, there is a complete new explosion of satellites and satellite analytics. It seems like the governments are passing over the mantle to the private industry, and that is where always the explosion occurred. This has been pretty much a government mandate, especially the work that I do with satellite imagery for the last I think, which we can say starting from the 70s. But this last 10 years, that around the time I was in the middle of my PhD, it has just started exploding. I mean, now we have data that is available for the commercial cost. You can order it, you can get it within, I think, 1 to 2 hours. And that data is so high resolution that you can do so many things with it. And this is now becoming more and more available. This is also the open source, and NASA, of course, provides a lot of open source data for scientific research. But even now with this commercial data, that's the way it's coming up. They're opening up so many things. I mean, I can also, sitting here in Pakistan, I can write a proposal tomorrow to get access to high resolution data for research, and then I can take it to commercialization. And this is happening all over the world. In Pakistan, it's happening in a certain manner. In US, all over the world, wherever I interact with people, I see this big explosion. A lot of countries, even Europe is investing so much in space. And I met someone in the European policy framework, and he said, we are following the example of the US. So they said something like, we see that the US, they invest certain number of dollars, and after a few years, they get 3x out of it. So this is what they're thinking. It's amazing. And the way this is opening up, I tell my students sitting here in Pakistan, I tell them, I'm teaching you, and I'm preparing you for the international market, because I know what the international market needs, and they do not have that many people to do this kind of thing. Especially in the EU, they have the Copernicus program, and they need more and more skilled people. So I see this huge explosion of data. Now that new data coming in, 3 times imagery of the same place in a day, not possible 3 years ago. The amount of analytics you can do with that, the amount of data analysis, the interesting things you can do with that is amazing. The second thing I say, which we talk about in our colleagues as well, is the process of automation. There was a time 15 years ago when you had to sit in a software, do click with your mouse and say, okay, I found an urban area, I found a forest. No, this is a time to learn programming and just go full blast at it. And this is amazing because it opens up the field to so many different domains: computer science, electrical engineering. You can even come from being a astronautical scientist to working with the satellite imaging. And there are a lot of these examples around the world. So these are the 2 things that really, really excite me. And I see this field growing so much in the commercial domain in the next 10 years. And I see this as very exciting for my own career and for all of us.
Naseem, did you want to say something, Maudood? Please.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make 2 points about this. One was that it's always useful to think about space as space for living and working and exploring space, those technologies that enable that, and space that is for the benefit of observing the earth and, agriculture production, environmental protection, and all that. And see, these 2 are very different in terms of what is required. For example, drug manufacturing in microgravity environment, or studying neurodegenerative diseases in space. There are these 2 are fundamentally 2 different areas. The second thing is, although there's a lot of data and a lot of technology and assets that are available, I think whoever in the world is able to make use of the data to solve problems is going to rule the world. And because eventually, yes, you analyze the data, but does it provide you a competitive advantage? That's the real crux of it. Commercial companies have not yet found that. They're providing data, but they haven't those applications that really change things in any fundamental ways. And so I think that's going to be the next frontier for the space that's used for the benefit of Earth.
I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that some of the commercial industries face: access to capital, insurance, and things of that nature. But I also want to give time to our Facebook audience to ask their questions. So I'm going to shift gears and take a look at some of the questions that we have coming in from the audience, and we will go from there. The first question we have is, do developing countries like Pakistan have conducive partnership building environments with other countries? Or is the space domain also more of a turf power struggle? Naseem, since you've worked in strategic partnerships before, could you speak to that question? And I can repeat it if need be.
That's a really interesting question. Science and math and physics have no boundaries. You can build anything you want wherever you are in the world. And if you have the knowledge, if you create the knowledge by yourself, nobody can stop you. So the only thing that would stop you is yourself. So I would say there are no barriers that I am aware of. There are no physical barriers, no scientific barriers. It is our own will and our ability to learn, make mistakes, and keep going that helps.
Thank you. That was exceptionally poetic. So thank you for that. I know it's morning for you, it's evening for us, but it's all poetry and it's all good. To follow up on that question, Mahhad, there was a question specifically directed to you that I think follows in line with what Naseem was just saying. Can you elaborate more on why space collaboration is an issue for addressing climate change? And perhaps if I could expand on that question, how Pakistan's institutions currently are engaging the international environment for that.
So I think if we need to extrapolate the dimensions of the climate crisis from the issues we face at land, sea, and air to space. And as I said, it definitely is a climate issue because space has fundamentally became part of our daily lives. Would you mind repeating your second question again?
Yeah, in terms of international partnerships and how, let me see because it was moved down. If you could elaborate more on space collaboration. So how does a government like Pakistan engage not just with the government of the United States, which has a robust space program, but also the European Space Agency, China, India, Japan, and other spacefaring countries? What does the relationship look like there?
So I'm not completely aware of because I don't have much knowledge about that, but I think that full cooperation should be extended with not only the big spacefaring nations but also the small spacefaring nations, as a lot of small countries are also getting into their into space with small sats or CubeSats. And I think a really good thing that can be done is to extend this cooperation among the students in terms of having competitions, building small satellites, student satellites, and you can collaborate for different subsystems of a satellite, and then the students can launch. I think it would be phenomenal if the students give rise to this cooperation, because those students will then also become the professionals in the space industry, and they would know the importance of cooperation in this regard. So I think despite whatever the current situation is, it is the need of the hour for Pakistan and as well as for every other country to extend cooperation in all the fields that are related to space.
Call to action, Dr. Waqas Qazi, Professor of Space Science at the Space Institute here. Can you speak a little bit to how you engaged your students and how you engage the international community? I assume that just given your background and your research that there are international symposia where these types of discussions are played out amongst not just scientists, but policymakers, communication specialists, et cetera. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes. I think I'm well placed to comment on that. I think starting from when I entered academia full on after my PhD, so I always maintained a link with my advisor in Colorado. We still exchange emails from time to time. And when on the first stage, I always found a good mentor in him. And then he encouraged to me, he said, go out and collaborate with more people. So interestingly, what Mahhad has said, I can give a bit more insight on that, connect with that, because I've been engaged with in some of these programs. So there is a lot of collaboration going on at various levels. There is actually a program of the US. I don't remember the exact name, but it was related to water science, and this professor from University of Washington, Seattle, I think he has been coming to Pakistan. I know one of my friends has been working with him. So that is an immediate example that comes to my mind, where they're using very, very specific satellite data to predict the water condition, the groundwater and drinking water condition in the coming 3 or 4 decades. That's just one example. There have been various, the exchange program I have been in, Fulbright program, that other exchange program, students in my university have been going there. So I think on the one hand, what the role I've been playing, or the role I see myself playing, is encouraging students. I remember one student came to me and they were asking me, there's this exchange program in the US, should I go? I said, go, just go, leave everything. If you get an opportunity, go. What you will learn, not only in education and science, but as a person, how you will grow it is a much less experience. And definitely when I go to these conferences in various countries, last time I was in Sweden a couple of years ago before Corona. So there was, it was great to see that in this field especially, there is very, very big participation from people all the world. You go to a university, you see people from all over the world, and actually you see very nice gender inclusion there as well. So I think I really like what our colleague from NASA said, that it's up to you what you want to do. I don't see any restriction, any let's say any barriers to accomplishing this. If you're passionate enough, if you're skilled enough, I can say that right now I can tell my students, if you learn this thing, go online, apply to these programs, and just keep persevering. And I guarantee you that if you are after it with good perseverance, you will get to a good position, to a good opportunity that you would want. So I've always had very good experience with international collaboration, international exclusivity, inclusivity this evening here. So, and
exclusively for really cool people who enjoy science, art, history, contemplating the cosmos. I get it.
Space people.
Well, thank you. And you brought up something that was really interesting, the inclusivity. And we did have a comment that I wanted to address that someone brought to our attention on Facebook, that it's important to ensure that the space industry itself is inclusive and achieves gender parity. Is there any recourse on this in the US or in Pakistan? And before I invite the panel to respond to that, I do want to say that the Department of State has a commitment to gender diversity and inclusion. We have the Office of Global Women's Issues, which works to promote the rights and empowerment of girls and women through US foreign policy. And I was doing some research and preparing for this panel, and I also learned that there's a community of women engineers in Islamabad that are very active and who do their best to try and bring as many young women and girls into this profession. And again, just since you're in the academic profession, I'm wondering if you perhaps could speak very briefly, since we're running out of time, about how you encourage young women and girls to continue this pursuit and this path and make way for their contributions to this field. Dr. Waqas.
Yes, I was thinking. I think that's a great question, because I recently I had two of my students who were graduated, and they came to this field because they were passionate about this, and then they came to field. They were doing research with me, and they were kind of let's say, not sure. They said, did we join the right field? Are there opportunities? And I said, stop thinking about it. Put yourself focus. Don't worry. This world is changing, and I'm sure that you will make your place in it. And I'm very happy to see that both of them are in very good position, and they're within the field. They did not take up something else. They are working within the domain of space in various capacities. And I think the best we can do as part of the faculty is to encourage more and more. If there are doubts, we need to clear them up. And I encourage especially female students in my class or in research to go above and beyond. I like to push them to go further as much as they can. And I'm very happy to say that I've not been disappointed with my students or with my colleagues that I work with. And they've always been responding. I think the big thing that missing sometimes in our universities is that motivation, that push, that belief in the students that you can accomplish something that you want. And I think once we can provide that to especially the women, I think this is the catalyst that can take them really high up into space.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much. I do want to ask one of the questions that was contributed by one of our 9-year-old participants, which I always encourage young people to participate in events like this. I always find it very inspiring. The planets discovered by the Kepler Space Telescope are usually given the name with its discovering telescope, like Kepler 1b, etc. So when James Webb Space Telescope will discover these planets, will the planets also be named after the James Webb Telescope? And this question is directed to Maudood and Naseem.
I will let Maudood answer that. That is from the Science Mission Directorate.
Yeah.
Well, generally, actually, how you name it is driven by what the science community feedback that science community gets. So the naming conventions and how do you name it is something that they poll and they ask people what we should do. So I think I'm not privy to what the latest discussions are, but they're thinking of making some changes. I don't know what they're going to be, but it would be premature for me to say anything about that.
So stay tuned, young student. You could perhaps be a part of the team of people who gets to name them, since that is a popular approach now to helping with citizen science engagements, is being a part of the naming process. Okay, we have time for just one more question before I get into my lightning round. The question is, how can a common man benefit, or woman, benefit from space technology in Pakistan? And how can you make this work in Pakistan where there is a lack of awareness regarding the subjects? This seems more of like a communications challenge, or how we communicate and talk about space technology and how it trickles down. Mahhad, do you want to take a stab at answering this question?
Sure. I think for a common man, the first thing to do is to manifest the use of space technology in their own life. So a lot of people are not aware how their cell phone is working, or when they put in Google Maps to go to a local restaurant, how are they getting signal, what all things are happening there. There are a lot of open source fun things to do related to space. Just track it. You can find sample images that you can work on. But most importantly, well, the question is a common man, and I dream of a world, and I dream of a Pakistan where every common man who desires to look at stars has the opportunity to do so. So I love the concept of telescopes, small telescopes, publicly available, in good condition.
Planetariums, yeah.
Planetariums, observatories in all cities, people just going there. They're open every night, and people just go there, look at the stars, do stargazing. And any student who is interested can do a little bit more. They can take images of Saturn and Jupiter, count the moons, look at the nebulas and all that. So for a common man, the first thing is to build their own awareness, because everything is available these days on the internet, about how they are manifesting the use of space technology in their individual lives. And then hopefully, I know there are astronomers communities in Lahore, Islamabad, and Karachi. So if they just Google, write in on Facebook about, Lahore Astronomical Society or Karachi astronomers, they would find like-minded people who are doing regular astronomical observations. They were halted due to the pandemic, but if a common man is interested to have an stargazing session, they can find it in one of these three cities.
This is gender inclusive. This is for young boys and girls, or adults who enjoy gazing at the cosmos. I still enjoy gazing at the stars. My father, who's now retired, does traveling astronomy, where he goes into more remote areas and is able to connect with elementary school students who may otherwise be locked out of access to these types of planetariums. As a traveling planetarium, and he helps to inspire them much in the same way that we have all been inspired. I do have some very nerdy lightning round questions, so get ready, because you're going to be in the hot seat, and we don't have very much time. So I'll ask the questions, and we'll go in this order with Mahhad, Waqas, Maudood, and Naseem. And these are meant to be off the cuff, not to be taken seriously. Hopefully you'll find them fun. Hopefully our Facebook audience will find them fun as well. Okay, are we ready? Question number 1, Star Trek or Star Wars? Mahhad.
Star Wars.
I cannot, this is a very tough question. I have to name both. I'm a diehard fan of both. I cannot pick one.
That's fair. Maudood.
Star Wars.
Oh.
Star Wars.
Oh my goodness, am I the only? I almost wore my Star Trek uniform to this. Thank God I didn't. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Okay, your favorite space-related book, Mahhad.
Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut. had this very amazing book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life in Space. It's beautifully written, and I think it's for for all age groups. And yep, that's it.
Okay, great. Waqas?
Well, it'll be a strange choice, but the first book that comes to my mind is A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Maudood.
Yeah, there's Leadership in Space. This is essays or speeches that Mike Griffin made while he was the administrator of NASA. I think it's an inspirational book.
They left copies of that book in the NASA foyer, and during my interview, I definitely took one of them because they were available to just take, and I took one of them, and I loved it. Great book. Naseem.
Hitchhiker's Guide, but I also like Carl Sagan's lectures.
Yes. I was going to say Cosmos. Your favorite fiction, nonfiction, or science fiction writer? Waqas. Excuse me, Mahhad.
I'll pass.
Okay. Waqas?
That's a tough question on a lightning round, but actually when Naseem said suddenly, I remember I love this book, Cosmos, so much. I think it is one of my favorite inspirational books. So I would have named it too if I remember. So I would say in terms of the space-related science fiction, it will be two. It will be Carl Sagan. It would be Arthur C. Clarke, two of them.
Oh, great. Yeah, Arthur C. Clarke is brilliant. Maudood?
I don't know if I have a favorite space author, but my favorite author these days is Barack Obama. There's not, no pun intended, sorry. It's not a political statement, just the way he writes is great.
Excellent. Naseem?
I go back to Dr. Sagan.
Yeah, to Carl Sagan, just brilliant. And to round it all off, I have more nerdy questions, but we are out of time. I do, if you could speak directly to our audience, what advice would you have for others who are interested in pursuing a career similar to you? We have to keep it short. It's not really a lightning question, but any final words of advice, Mahhad?
Any person who is enthusiastic about space should be able to find a part of their particular field that has a relevance with space. So just Google it and you will find your answers.
Yeah, exactly. That could be art, it could be music, it could be politics, it could be astrobiology, it could be astroarchaeology. The fields of study are literally endless as it relates to this. Waqas, last words?
Yes, I think I would just say, don't give up your passion, keep going, and you will be able to find your launch seat very soon.
Maudood?
Well, I think for anybody teaching or talking to young people, I think giving them people the sense that anything is possible is the most powerful gift that you can give somebody. And for the young people, they just have to follow the life that they want to live and that worry less about everything else. It usually works out.
Great. Naseem?
So this is the advice I give to college students and high school students, including my children. Find your passion. It doesn't matter what it is. Find your passion. But number 2 rule is you must stick with it. And then eventually you'll get to, pardon me, eventually you'll get to higher ends of that passion. But find your passion and stick with it.
I can just say that for weeks I have been just tickled by the opportunity to be able to be to moderate this panel. It's a topic that again is very dear to my heart, and I thank you all for your morning and your evening, for joining us, and for the PUAN network for contributing their Facebook questions and for participating in this discussion as well, and for their suggestions for future panels. And I would love to thank our wonderful audience for participating in this conversation this evening. So thank you. I do have one last surprise to thank our panelists. We did purchase some fun space-themed art from a local vendor. So you will be mailed one of these, but there is a local vendor who translates really awesome Star Wars, coincidentally, it's reflecting off of mine, but Star Wars yet Pakistani influence influenced art. I have purchased many of these and they decorate my home, and they're just a really fun way to help bring the cosmos and pop culture together. So we will be in connection with you all so that we can send those small gifts from a local vendor to you all to thank you for your participation. To our audience, please join us on Tuesday, June 29th for a conversation with former NASA Administrator Major General Charlie Bolden. We will be discussing space commercialization. This will be a 90-minute Q&A, so plenty of time to answer your questions. We welcome you to join on Facebook as well. For the panelists, thank you again. My deepest and sincerest thank you and gratitude for joining today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It was very nice.
And